Welcome back to Colster's Classroom. One of the most frequently asked questions I get is, how do I study for your test? Or from parents, they ask me, how can I help my students study? Well, let's talk about what studying is not to start off with. First of all, studying is not reading the book. That's introducing yourself to the material. Again, I repeat, reading the book is not studying. That is beginning to learn the material. Studying is not reviewing the notes. That's basically review. Again, that's not studying. Cramming the night before is not an effective means of study. Listening in class is not studying. That's introducing yourself to the material. Hanging out with your friends and having a study session is not studying. A lot of times there are distractions in those groups. Now, it's not the worst idea in the world if you have a group of students who are highly motivated, actually could be a good means of studying, but you need to make sure you get together with people who have the same intention as yourself to study. So those are all things that are not studying, and I see that frequently. A lot of students will come into school, they'll have me fourth period, fifth period, and they'll glance over the notes first and second period, and they believe that's studying. That is not studying, that's cramming. It's not even close to studying. So in a minute, I'll talk to you about how you should study. Before we get into the studying tips, let's talk about a studying trap. I see students pulling out cell phones and trying to study with them all the time. It is so much less effective than if you put the cell phone away. It's not even funny. There's actually been some studies that show you only retain 1/4 of the information that you would retain had you studied without the cell phone. So if you're a student, the smart thing to do is put the cell phone away for half an hour or an hour while you actually study. If you're a parent, I highly recommend you remove the cell phone until the student shows you that they have retained what they need to retain. And I'll show you a really easy trick to determine whether the student has retained what you want them to retain at the end of this video. So I highly recommend you put away the cell phone, because really, you're just really wasting your time. You're not going to retain anywhere near as much information. I'm not going to go into great depth on learning styles because I actually made an entire video on learning styles. You can go watch that video and determine what type of learning style you have and the study techniques that you can use that correspond with your learning style. Same thing with learning disabilities. If you have a learning disability, I highly recommend you come up with some strategies to implement when you're trying to study. So just keep that in mind, that there are kinesthetic learners, visual learners, auditory learners, and there are tons of learning disabilities out there. So if you know your learning style or your learning disability, use techniques and implement them to help you study. All right, this is my preferred method of studying. This is what got me through college, and I'm going to teach it to you. Use note cards. Put all of your vocab on a note card. I'm going to talk to you in the next slide about all of the things that you should be putting on your note cards, but at a bare minimum, you should have the key terms and the vocabulary. Put the word on the front and the definition on the back. You might even want to draw a diagram on the back of whatever that particular concept is. Then create two piles, a right pile and a wrong pile, or a correct pile and an incorrect pile. Everything you get into the correct pile when you're practicing. So you're going to pick up this stack of note cards. You're going to flip them over and see how many of the definitions you can get correctly. Put the ones you get correct in the correct pile. Put the ones you miss in the incorrect pile, and then redo them. Take your correct pile, slide it away, and keep going through your incorrect pile until you get all of them right. Once you do that, I'd basically circulate through the piles at least 3 times. Once you do that, you're probably in pretty good shape for the day. And you want to do that each day. Budget half an hour, 45 minutes each day for the subject that you're studying for. That will get the vocabulary into long-term memory. You're going to want to keep them organized. If you keep these note cards, you'll be able to use them again and again. In a year-long course like mine, where at the end of the course you take a test for college credit, you may have stacks of note cards, and you're going to want to organize them by chapter. When I was in college, people used to actually pay me to come over and study with me because I had all of the chapters done and I had stacks and stacks of note cards according to chapter on a desk in my living room. And I would go through them again and again and again until I could get them all in the correct pile, and I kept them organized so I could focus on chapter after chapter. So hopefully that helps you come up with a study technique, note cards. And I use them in real life too. Give you two examples. One, when I go to poker tournaments, I play high-level amateur poker. And when I'm doing that, I have a stack of note cards with tells, things like blink rate, breathing pattern, what people are doing with their feet. I'm looking at all of those things and I'm trying to figure out the information. And I have note cards that correspond. It'll simply say blink rate, and then on the back side it will say if they stop blinking, essentially they're lying and it's probably a bluff. So again, before each tournament, I flip through those. A second example of using this in real life is I have a current NFL player who's a former student of mine. He's actually playing in the NFL right now, and last year was his rookie year. And I know for his rookie year, to learn the plays, he put all of them on note cards. I like to think that I had something to do with teaching him how to learn. So again, every time he catches a touchdown, I get excited and I'm like, I taught that kid. So use note cards. They're useful in class, they're useful for learning, and they're useful in real life when you're trying to learn something like new plays to play in the NFL. I mentioned putting the definitions and the keywords on note cards as a bare minimum. So you want all of the keywords from the notes, you want all of the keywords from the book, all of those and their definitions as a bare minimum. I would also recommend putting diagrams demonstrating them if appropriate. That's, again, a bare minimum. The next thing I would recommend doing is going through your notes, and anytime a teacher says, you'll see this again, this is on the test, this is important, you should be highlighting those words and those concepts. Those are called marker expressions. When a teacher gives you a marker expression, you should be listening to those things when you are taking notes or reading through your notes, keeping along with the teacher. And if they say something like, you'll see this again, or this is important, put an asterisk next to it or highlight it because you will see it again. So again, anything with a marker expression deserves its own note card. What I did, if you really want to get sophisticated here and make those A's and be a curve buster, I went through in college when I was going back for working on all the biology courses I needed to take. I went through every paragraph, literally every paragraph in the book, and I would make one or two questions out of it and put it on a note card. That's how in depth I took it. The other thing, when you're reading through a book, whenever you see diagrams and pictures, that doesn't mean there's less stuff to read. When I started out, I was kind of lazy and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm glad there's a lot of pictures because that's less reading I need to do. As I became a better learner, I learned that anytime you see a diagram or a picture, that's important and probably deserves its own note card. So again, I would recommend putting diagrams and pictures on the note cards as well. So depending on how sophisticated you want to be, at a bare minimum, you want to put vocab words and key terms with definitions on the back. And then you might want to go through the book and find those concepts that are in the margins and put those on note cards. And anything with a marker expression in your notes definitely deserves a note card. In a moment, I'll tell you how to check to see if you're retaining what you need to retain. Parents, if you're watching this video, this is where you come in. What I would recommend is when your student is done studying for half an hour or 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is that you set aside for them, randomly select 5 or 6 note cards and ask the student to give you the definition on the back or tell you what the concept is. If they get all 5 or 6 correct, they're done for the night. You've verified that they've retained what they were supposed to retain. If they don't, then give them another 15 minutes to go through and rework the pile until they get them all correct. So, and if you're a responsible student and you want to self-check, that's the thing you can do is randomly select 5 or 6, verify that you got them correct, and then when you get them correct, you're done for the night. And you want to do this night after night until it's in long-term memory. And again, this is another great way to review if you have a year-end test for college credit or something. hopefully you guys have learned something for this. Thanks for visiting Colster's Corner. Consider subscribing. I'm going to make a few more videos like this and post them over the course of the year. And again, thank you very much for visiting my channel. Talk to you soon.